So actually, I have a slightly updated slide deck. So this is exclusive material now. So in these pictures, by the way, my wife drew them, like these pictures that now they are on the website. So I think they're really cute.
Nice illustration.
Okay, yeah, let's start. So thanks everyone for joining us today. So this event is brought to you by DataTalks.Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events, and today is one of such events. So we have interviews on Friday, and we have webinars on Tuesday. If you want to find out more about our events, you can go to our website, which you can also find in the description section, which is DataTalks.Club/events, and you can find all the events that we plan for the next weeks. And also on the page, you'll find a link to our Google Calendar. If you don't want to miss any events, you can just subscribe to our calendar and you will get notified about all the events. Or if you don't like and you just want to subscribe to individual events, you'll find all the events in the events page. Also, to stay up to date with everything in our channel, you should subscribe it. So just click on the subscribe button. And last but not least, if you haven't joined our Slack, please do. It's awesome there. We talk about different data-related topics. If you have any questions during today's conversation, you can ask any question in Slido. So there is a pinned link in live chat. So you just go there, you click on this link, and you ask any question you want, and we will cover these questions as we go. And last thing, I asked Arpit to keep an eye on our events Q&A channel. So I know that many of you are watching these the events in recording, and you do not get a chance to ask questions. So if you watch this event in recording and you want to ask something, you can go to our Slack events Q&A channel and ask your question there. And that's all for the introduction. We can start. Are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I have my notes. So this week we'll talk about becoming a data-led professional, and we have a special guest today, Arpit. And for those who don't know, Arpit actually is one of the first people who joined DataTalks.Club. I think maybe you were one of the first 10 or 20, something like this. And I remember asking you some tips because your title is like I checked your LinkedIn and it was something about growth and
community.
Yeah. And of course, I immediately became interested and started to ask you different questions about, hey, how do I grow the community? And Arpit is also the founder of Data-Led Academy, which is a to-go place for everybody who is interested in data, who wants to learn how to work with data, how to learn everything about data, and you want to ask any data-related question. This is the place to look for answers. So welcome, Arpit.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Alexei, for the intro. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I think Data Talks is a really great community. Excited to be part of it. And just to let people know, Data-Led Academy is not exactly a community. It's not a Slack community, but essentially it's a place to learn how to work with data. So we have like a lot of free learning content. And then we're also creating a repository of common questions that people have about tools, technologies, people, and processes related to data. So you can like go and find these answers to those questions there. So excited to be here. Thanks again.
And you also have a podcast, which you...
We have a podcast called, it's actually called the Data-Led Professional. So you can check out the podcast on our website, dataled.academy/podcast. And we basically talk about different data-related topics, primarily focused on topics that are relevant for, I like to use the term less technical people who are not exactly data engineers or data analysts. Of course, they can also benefit from the content, but our core audience is basically people working in product growth and operations roles or marketing who want to basically learn about data and different data-related topics. And typically, our goal is to answer, again, common questions that people have about data.
Yes. So before we go into our main topic of data-led, of becoming data-led, maybe we can start with your background. Can you tell us about your career journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, I've been working in the technology industry for pretty much my whole career, but I've sort of worked in different types of companies. I really got into the data space when I was basically working as a consultant, and I was building a lot of integrations for SMBs. And that led me to Integromat. So I was a user of Integromat. Integromat is an iPaaS solution like Workado, Tray, Zapier, etc. And I was like one of the earliest people to join the Integromat team. I actually built the Integromat community, and then eventually I led growth at Integromat. I moved on from Integromat soon after it got acquired late last year. Since then, I worked with a few other companies. Basically, again, companies in the data space solving different problems in the customer data infrastructure sort of space. And now I'm building Data Led Academy while also working with a few data companies, helping them with their content and community strategy. For me, content community is really is all I've been doing. At Integromat also, content community is what helped us grow really fast. And it's really important for especially data companies to build their presence across different communities where their prospects, customers, partners hang out. Communities like DataTalks.Club. Instead of building a new community, a lot of people are building new communities, but I believe that there are already a lot of great communities, and that's why I like to be active in existing communities, and that's the idea behind Data Led Academy, to not build another community, but basically sort of create a place where people can get concrete, expert, actionable answers, expert, unbiased, actionable answers to their questions. And a lot of these answers are basically answered by experts who are from these communities. So yeah, that's a bit about my background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. So this term growth, and this is something you did at Integromat. So I was curious what actually growth managers do, and when I checked, it's very data driven. I don't know how to describe, but they use a lot of data. So judging, like when I look at the title, growth manager or growth marketing, it doesn't sound too data related to me, but when I actually read, and they run a lot of A/B tests, they need to make a lot of decisions. All these decisions are based on data. So I guess this is how you ended up creating this data-led academy, right? So because you saw how data is useful. Okay.
Yeah. Without data, you can't really, I mean, there's only so much you can do. I shouldn't say you can't do anything, but there's only so much you can do. In simple terms, like if you don't have data, when you're building growth experiences, whether it's for, acquisition, activation, or retention or whatever, without data, you'd be forced to build linear experiences, like every customer, irrespective of their behavior, they will go through the same path. Right. But when you have data, you can actually create personalized experiences where customers, the prospects will see content or interact with your product based on where they come from, what their industry is, and how they basically interact with your product. So that is the main difference, and it's very hard for growth professionals or even product managers to really build personalized customer experiences across different across different touch points and channels without having access to data, and having access to data in the tools that they use. It's not just enough to have access to data in a data warehouse or in a BI tool. It's more important than ever to have access to data in the tools that they use to build and craft these customer experiences.
So tools that marketers use to make different decisions, right? Because they cannot just go and, or most of them probably, I don't know, but most of the marketers I worked with, they cannot just go and run a SQL query in a database, right? They need help for that.
Yeah, marketers, growth professionals, product people, operations people, they need not really know how to write SQL. Of course, if they know, it's an added advantage, but there are a lot of great tools out there that allow you to, visually query the data. And so if the data is made available, then they can easily sort of use the data for for whatever they're doing. So whether it's creating in-app experiences or creating lifecycle email campaigns or doing A/B tests like you mentioned, or doing like an SMS campaign, for example. Irrespective of the channel that they're using to engage with customers, they can sort of use this data if the data is available in the tools that they use. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what is data-led? So I think you have a definition, right? So what is that?
Yeah. So my definition of data-led is basically a data-led professional, data-led person is someone who understands where data comes from, what it looks like. They're able to question its accuracy, not just blindly believe the data that they see. So if they understand where data comes from and what it looks like, they'll be able to question its accuracy. And then, of course, they are comfortable working with data. And they have the skills to build these experiences powered by data. So it sounds like a lot, but essentially it's you don't really need a technical background, I would say, to know any of this stuff, to understand where data comes from, what it looks like, to question its accuracy, and to basically work with data to build data-led experiences.
Mm-hmm. Is there any difference between being data-driven and data-led? Data-driven is something I hear quite often. And to be honest, I still have no idea what it actually means. I think sometimes it's used like a buzzword.
It is a buzzword,
like, okay,
I would
we're
say.
data-driven, and what does it mean? And yeah, maybe you can just explain a bit what it means and what are the differences between data-driven and data-led, if there are any differences at all.
Yeah, like you said, it is sort of a buzzword. But like how I like to think of data driven is basically to base decisions exclusively on available data. Every company wants to be data driven, so they're investing heavily in data infrastructure. Once data is available, they want to like to be data driven would be to not again question the accuracy of the data and not use your intuition and experience before making decisions. Data is all about making decisions. It helps you, good data helps you make good decisions, but you cannot always blindly follow what data tells you, because there's so many ways the data that you see can be inaccurate. There are so many data quality issues that can be there. So it's important to basically combine your intuition, your experience, along with the data that you see. So that, I would say, is the difference between being data driven versus being data led, where data is leading you or guiding you rather than just telling you, just blindly following what data tells you.
Mm-hmm. So it's that part where you said like data-led professional is somebody who understands where the data comes from, can question its accuracy, and comfortable working with data. So I guess the second point about questioning is the main factor that differentiating factor, right, between these two.
Yeah, and you can only question its accuracy if you understand where data is being collected or how it is being collected. If nothing is documented, you can't really understand anything, so you can't really question it. So it's very important to have proper documentation on your data sources. One of the things that we talk a lot about, especially in the context of product and growth, is having a data tracking plan, which essentially it could be a simple Google Doc, or Google Sheet, or there are purpose-built tools now to create your tracking plans where you define every event that is being captured, and related properties that are being captured, and even the data types of each property. So when these things are well defined, any product or growth professional can look at that information and understand that, okay, this event is captured when someone performs this particular action. The sign up event is captured when someone not just submits a sign up form, but when the sign up is completed, rather than just being a client side event versus being a server side event. So when you specify these things, you enable people to understand where data comes from, so that's really important, like documenting everything to be able to pass on that knowledge to others, because the person who would implement it, they cannot be around forever to explain to people where this data is coming from. And once you have that understanding, then you're able to question the accuracy. When you see an anomaly, when you see that the data doesn't look right, you can actually go and drill down and figure out what the issue is, instead of just flying blind or just blindly trusting what you see.
So for this, so I mentioned this data tracking plan and document which describes all these events. So how do you, when do you actually need to do this? So let's say is it for startups or is it for mature organizations? I guess for any type of company, they already have some data sources, so something is already going on the platform. And then they hire, I don't know, a growth marketer, right? Somebody who comes in and now needs to make decisions based on data, right? Yes.
So I would say it depends. I mean, it depends on the stage of the company. I've seen some big companies not having a tracking plan at all, which is a problem. So essentially, every company that has a tech product or a tech-enabled product or even an e-commerce business needs to have this documented, whether it's a tracking plan, or some companies use other different tools to sort of document this. It use tools, like visual tools like Miro and stuff. So it's usually done even before you instrument, data, before you set up instrumentation, before you set up a product analytics. So instrumentation in the sense before you set up, let's say, a product analytics tool or any tool that depends on event data, you instrument your product events. The process of tracking product data is often referred to as instrumentation. So this is usually done, again, there's no rule when it's done, but it's typically done when companies are ready to sort of invest in product analytics tools or other event-based engagement tools like Customer Eye or Braze, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many tools where you can use events to personalize customer experiences. So, and this is something that obviously is relevant to startups as well as big companies, more so with big companies, because at a big company, if you don't have this stuff documented, new people will come in and they'll have no idea what to do with the tools. They'll see a bunch of events, let's say in Intercom, and they're supposed to create some in-app experiences or some email campaigns, but they won't know what an event means, right? Or they might see conflicting events. They might see an event called signed up, another event called signed up with a different casing. So all of those issues sort of come up if you don't have things documented and well instrumented. So I would recommend every company to do this sooner rather than later, because of course you need to sort of have customers and you need to have users to be able to make sense of this data. Otherwise you set it up, but there won't be any data to analyze or act upon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I mentioned this growth marketer, but there are a lot of different users of data. So we have the data analysts, we have product managers, basically everyone who needs to make a certain decision on data. They would need to analyze the data, and they would need to understand each event, right? So what is the origin of this event? And I think you mentioned if they see something strange in the data, they need to be able to question this. Okay, there is a spike in, I don't know, registrations or something like this, or in certain type of event. Okay, well, what does it mean, right? And then they would be able to go and drill in and understand what's happening, right?
Yeah, absolutely. An example would be, let's say you see a spike, a ridiculous spike in your signups, and you know that it doesn't look right. If you have the event instrumented properly and you're also capturing relevant properties with that event, you can actually figure out where the signups are coming from. And oftentimes you might realize that, these are fake signups or bots. That's something a lot of companies have been experiencing. So you'd be able to do that. Another thing that I would like to mention is that you mentioned product growth, and we've been talking about product marketing growth people, but product data or event data is extremely useful for even for salespeople today. So salespeople look at a CRM, they look at data about a company or about a prospect. But when they have access to product data, where they can see what a prospect in their trial period is doing inside the product, it gives them more context, and then they can like go after the right accounts rather than again, just going after everybody who's a prospect in their CRM. When they see that, this particular account has, they already have 5 users in their account, and they've already gone ahead and like, performed a bunch of actions. If it's a project management tool, they've already gone ahead and created a project and created a bunch of tasks. So now would be a good time to sort of reach out to them versus just again reaching out to everybody who just shows up in your CRM, and maybe based on the company size or whatever. So it's extremely useful for even for sales or like sales and BD people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is very important to document your data, right? Mm-hmm. And we discussed, I think you mentioned that you can do this with Miro. I think I saw some things like that in like just an Excel spreadsheet, or not necessarily Excel, but maybe Google spreadsheet, like some online spreadsheets. Are there any special tools for that, or just people use whatever they're comfortable with?
No, so now there are like purpose-built tools for that. So there's one called Avo. So Avo, there's another one called Iteratively. There's the new one called Track Plan. I can share these names on Slack. So people can explore these tools. So these are actually tools that are especially built for companies to create their tracking plan in a collaborative manner rather than relying on a spreadsheet. So they obviously have a lot of features that are really useful that enable you to maintain data quality, maintain a taxonomy, like collaborate on each event. A lot of times you might describe an event, and the developer who's supposed to instrument it, they might have questions about that event. So you can like discuss stuff. So these tools are really, really useful, I would say, and they're worth exploring.
Mm-hmm. So so you said a developer who is supposed to instrument this event. So the way I interpret it, the way I understand it is, so first you create this tracking plan, right? So you you take you write down all the events, all the type of events you want to capture. It doesn't mean you capture them yet, but you want to start tracking them, right? And then there is a developer, or maybe a mobile developer, or some engineer who now needs to go and implement this to start tracking this data, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So because the data doesn't just appear magically on your dashboard, right? And then you make a decision. You actually need to capture this data and to do many, many other things, right? So maybe we can talk a bit about this, like, okay, now we have a tracking plan, and now a developer, we tell a developer, hey, can you please instrument this event? Can we start collecting them? And then we have the other end of this is like an analyst or somebody is looking on a dashboard and now can make a decision, like this campaign, this type of campaign, this variant of a campaign is better than this variant of a campaign, right? So then we can make a decision. And there is a big, like a lot of things happen between these two, right?
Absolutely. So I would say like data collection is the first step, and even before let's talk about a startup that doesn't have any data infrastructure in place. Let's think of a SaaS product. It could be a project management tool or invoicing tool. Before you implement any tools, any like product analytics tools or any tools that rely on data, you need to first create a tracking plan and describe all the events that you want to capture, and then describe all the properties you want to capture with every event. You also want to describe your user properties, and you also want to describe organization or account properties. So all the different pieces of data that you ideally want to collect. And this is really important, because when you start doing this, you feel like you want to collect this also and that also. You might end up with like 50 events, and which is great. But the next step is to basically remove all the events that you don't need in the near future, because having too much data at the beginning is like one of the biggest issues. It also obviously takes more time to implement. It takes more time to test. So like bring it down to like 7 or 10 events that you really need to understand the customer journey from acquisition to activation.
Maybe we can think of some examples. So you said like a SaaS product, which could be a project management tool or accounting tool or something like this.
Yeah. So if it's sorry, go on.
Yeah. So yeah, I was going to suggest maybe we can take one of the tools. I think you said invoicing tool. That probably makes it easier.
Let's take project management. Okay, yeah, invoicing. Either way. So you start by obviously tracking your sign up event. Sometimes I recommend people to even track the event which is email verified, because depending on how your sign up flow is, you might not always, you might have people who sign up, but they don't end up verifying your email. So it's useful to have that, because you might want to like create some emails based on that event. So like sign up, email verified. If it's a project management tool, obviously one of the first things is to create a project and then invite a user, because a project management tool is no good if someone doesn't invite another user to work with. So like project created, user invited, those would be like the core events that you track. And then of course you also want to see whether they create a task. So task created, if it's an invoicing tool, again it could be an invoice created, or like with an invoicing tool, you probably add a client. So it could be client added or client created, and then invoice created. And then you want to maybe, again, invite your colleagues, so user invited. So these are the most common events. So yeah, like you definitely start with these. For each event, you'd describe relevant properties. So for the sign up event, you obviously want to describe the user's name and email, but also if you're asking the user, so let's say there's a sign-ups form where you're asking the user which industry they belong to and what is their role. So you definitely want to capture that information alongside that event. So stuff like that. So yeah, once you have that, once you're happy with your events, that's when you basically bring in an engineer, and then you basically discuss it with them, get their feedback. Of course, engineers have a lot of good feedback. Get their feedback, polish your tracking plan. Once you agree upon it, you basically, even like, I highly recommend you to even describe for every event, describe whether it's a client-side event or a server-side event. That's really important. It's obviously now better to track more events server-side, but you might want to track some client-side events. So it's important to describe that, so that
what's the difference? Like so a sign up is a client-side or server-side?
So it depends how you end up implementing it, right? Like if you're tracking it client side, the event will be fired as soon as someone clicks the sign up button, submits the form. But if you're tracking server side, it'll only be fired once the sign up process is actually completed, once that user is actually added in your database. Like a lot of times, users will click that sign up button and there'll be an error that you need to, there might be a validation error that, your password is not right or your email is not right, but the event will be fired. So you might see a sign up, whereas an actual sign up hasn't even taken place, right? So you ideally track that server side, but there might be for some use cases for tracking client side events where you actually want to track if someone clicked a button. This is usually useful inside your app if you want to see if someone tried clicking on a button to use a feature. Even if they don't use the feature, you want to know that someone actually tried using it. So that's like useful information for you. So that could be a client-side event, yeah. So yeah, once you have that, I would recommend that, once you start working with your engineers, often there might be multiple engineers involved. So you should even specify, which engineer is going to implement which event. So you can have a column, or you can specify who owns which event. Once you have everything done, and once you actually have data flowing in, you're actually sort of done with the collection stage. The next step is to obviously make sure that this data that is being collected is being stored in a warehouse. Of course, for early stage startups, it might not be possible to set up a warehouse, although it's not hard at all to set up a warehouse today. It's also very affordable. So it's highly recommended to store this event data or product data in a warehouse, because if you don't, you'd obviously be sending it to, let's say, a product analytics tool like Mixpanel or Amplitude or whatever, and a few other tools, but you won't really have access to this raw event data to be used in the future. So it's highly recommended that you store it. And then, of course, you want to analyze this data. Typically, event data is analyzed in a product analytics tool. Some people also end up doing this in a BI tool, but BI tools are not, purpose built to analyze event data. So you'd obviously sort of need an analyst who would have to write a whole bunch of SQL queries to actually create, let's say, a simple funnel report in a BI tool that you could do in a product analytics tool with a few clicks. So irrespective of the tools you're using to analyze the data, you basically analyze it and you derive insights from the data. And then, of course, you want to activate that data or act upon that data. And that's obviously the most important thing. Like, you can't just look at data and be happy with it. You need to do something about it. And that's when data activation sort of comes into place. And once this data is available in your activation tools, your email tools, your support tools, support is a really good use case, like something that a lot of people don't think about. But if you make this event data available in your support tools, you actually enable your support teams to actually see what users have done in the product. So they don't have to ask people when someone opens a ticket, they don't have to reply saying, hey, did you try doing this? Or did you try doing that? Or can you try doing this? Because they can actually see the different events that users have performed. So they don't have to, you can provide better support.
Are there companies who actually have this? Because all my experience with customer support says that none of them.
More and more companies realize the importance of this. Is just obviously, it's not a priority for most companies, but of course there are many companies that provide great support. They have this, and it's really not hard. Once you have the data, you just have to sort of send this data to Zendesk or whatever support tool you're using. So that's the thing with data, right? Like, every company, or let's say 100 different companies, will have access to this data, but maybe only 5 of them are actually using this data across different sort of channels and making this data available to different teams, right? Even the sales example is really important, useful. Salespeople don't generally have access to product data in the tools that they use, right? But now more and more companies realize that the importance of this, and now there are like a new breed of companies that have come up. They're building sort of these new tools, which are now sort of dubbed as CRM 2.0 tools, where salespeople can actually access product data and be more sort of responsive, and like they don't have to just create sort of these linear experiences. So So yeah, once you have the data in the right tools, you can activate the data, and you can build these really good personalized customer experiences. And then of course you can send this data back to your product and personalize the product experience also. Based on and like I think HubSpot is a really good example. There are a bunch of other companies that do this really well, where the way people experience the product is also sort of personalized based on what they've done earlier in the product, So that is the ultimate sort of destination where you're not just like analyzing data and using it to create experience outside your product, but also inside your product. It's worth mentioning that tools like Amplitude, which is obviously one of the most popular product analytics tool, has launched a new sort of a product or a feature called Amplitude Recommend, where you can actually do this using Amplitude, where you can send the data from Amplitude back to your product, and of course to other tools to create like a unified customer experience.
Yeah. So maybe we can take a step back. There was a lot of information, and I have so many questions. But starting even from the beginning. So you said for tracking plan, for creating this tracking plan, we can use, you mentioned a tool, I think, called Track Plan, right? And there are some other things. Then, okay, we have this tracking plan. Then a developer, an engineer would go and implement this, do data collection. I know, are there specific tools for that, for collecting data?
So typically, like, of course, there are sort of CDI tools, customer infrastructure tools that, so the ones I mentioned, TrackPlan is one, but Arvo and Iteratively sort of these are tools that allow you to also collect your data, not just create the tracking plan. But other popular tools would be segment connections. So segment connections is one of the most popular tools people use to track product data. There's also RudderStack. There's another one called MetaRouter, which is relatively new. There are a whole bunch of tools. There's one called FreshPaint, which enables implicit tracking, so you don't even have to define tracking. It's just like auto track. Once you install it, it starts tracking all the events automatically, like Heap does. And then, of course, companies do this using code, and some companies build a microservice just for their tracking purposes. But then, of course, there are all these great tools that I mentioned. In fact, I have written about this. So I'd be happy to share this content. And
please send the link, and I'll include it in the description.
Yeah,
okay.
For sure.
So, and then you mentioned that the data should be the data we collect, we can send immediately to product analytics tool, but it's better to store it in a warehouse. So what is a warehouse? I think it's essentially like a database that you own, right? So it's not like a third party tool, but maybe you can tell it tell us what it is. Is it any database, or it's some sort of special database?
Yeah, so a data warehouse is generally a database that is purpose-built for analytics, right? So it's not like a typical database, and companies use it to store large amounts of structured data, and then they obviously create data models in the data warehouse. So they transform the data, they clean the data. There are, of course, other tools just for transformation purposes, tools like dbt, trifactor, etc., which you're well aware of. And once you have this clean structured data in the warehouse, you can basically analyze this data in a BI tool. It's also worth mentioning that there are product analytics companies that are now sort of warehouse centric. So if you have a warehouse and if you're already sending data to your warehouse and you want to implement a product analytics tool, you don't have to use their SDKs to sort of send data to them directly. You can send data from your warehouse to these product analytics tools. There's also a tool called Rakam, which you don't even need to send data to it. It just sits on top of a warehouse like a BI tool and offers product analytics features. So it's really important to set up a warehouse, and the popular warehouses worth mentioning are obviously Snowflake, Google BigQuery, AWS Redshift. There's some new ones called Firebolt is a newer data warehouse. In fact, we have someone from Firebolt in our community. And then
I think I saw recently also in DataTalks.Club.
Right. Yeah. In your exactly. That's what I mentioned. That's what I meant. And then there are a bunch of other, of course, warehouse vendors. There's one called Panapply. So once you have the data in the warehouse, you can actually do a lot of things with it, and you can actually send it back to your not just BI tool, but also product analytics tools. And then you can even send it to your engagement tools. And there are, again, a new bunch of companies that have come up that are just solving this problem. They're sort of referred to as reverse ETL tools or operational analytics tools. Companies like Census, Hightouch, Grouperoo, they're basically solving this exact problem, that you have the data in the warehouse and you want to basically send data to a lot of different tools, your sales, marketing, advertising, support tools, or whatever product analytics tools. You can do that using this third-party tool. So yeah, there are a lot of different tools solving different pieces of the puzzle. Of course, like to implement all of these different tools, you'd need like a lot of resources. You'd need a data team, at least a couple of, or maybe at least one dedicated data engineer. So it's not possible for early stage startups to do everything. And that's where it's also worth mentioning CDPs, customer data platforms, which are sort of they're like an all-in-one bundled solution where you can track data and then you can send data to different tools. So you can create audiences and create your models and segments inside a CDP. Of course, it has limited capabilities. You can't exactly do everything you can do in a warehouse, but it still gives a lot of flexibility to marketers and growth professionals to work with data without relying on data teams. So yeah.
I was trying to take a note of all the tools you mentioned, but there are simply so many. And I'm wondering, so let's say I just started a startup. I and my co-founder. So I haven't started the startup. I'm just like a
hypothetical, yeah.
Yes. So I have a co-founder. So there are two of us. We just started the startup, and we understand that data is important. We want to collect, and we look at all these tools, and there are just too many. Like, how do we make a decision which tool to choose? Like,
I think it's not about.
Are they different, similar? Yeah. How to choose?
Yeah, I think it's first important to define what your goals are, and a good way to think about this is to like just list down 10 questions that you want to answer with data, and then work backwards and figure out the tools. Of course, there are ready-made tools, but a lot of companies end up fixing these problems or implementing these solutions without buying ready-made tools, by building in-house tools. So it depends what your resources are, because these tools can also get expensive. But at the very least, you need to start collecting data. So you need a tool like a CDI tool, like segment connections, Rudderstack, MetaRouter. I'll share this whole list. I've actually written a lot about this stuff, so I'll share this list. And once you have the data, you obviously want to analyze it. So, and of course, it's worth mentioning that a lot of these tools do have free tiers, free plans. So, you can explore different tools and see what works for you. But at the very least, you want to analyze this data in a product analytics tool, or even like a simple BI tool, or both. Actually, it makes sense to have both, depending on because they both sort of serve different purposes and cater to different teams. And then, of course, you want to have like an email tool where you send this data to create personalized emails, to create onboarding experiences. If you have a SaaS product, you want to do some in-app onboarding. So, there are tools for that, and you can send this data to those tools. So there are these 4 or 5 different tools. So I like to mention this. So I like to think of this data stack as the modern data stack for growth. So typically, if you hear the term modern data stack, you generally hear it in the context of analytics. The modern data stack for analytics is like how I would describe it, where you have you have an ELT tool like Fivetran, Stitch, etc., where ingesting data from all third-party tools into a warehouse, and then you have a BI tool and you have a transformation tool. So that's typically a modern data stack for analytics. And DBT is worth mentioning here. It's growing so fast, and so many companies are adopting DBT for their transformation needs and modeling needs. And then BI tools like Looker, Mode, etc. So that's like the modern data stack for analytics. In terms of modern data stack for growth, I would say you need a data collection tool, a product analytics tool, and then a warehouse is almost table stakes, like every company should have it. And then, of course, tools that make data available in your downstream SaaS tools, sales, marketing, support tools. And that could be a customer data platform. It could be, if you're using tools like Segment Connections or Rudderstack, they can do that. They have that capability. Or if you're storing the data in the warehouse, then you can use a reverse ETL tool. And each of these categories has obviously multiple tools. So, like a lot of them are very similar, some have different capabilities. So it is sort of time consuming to evaluate all of these different tools and, understand the differences. And that's actually one of the things I'm trying to solve with Data Led Academy. I'm still launching this thing called company profiles, where, you can go and learn about a product in a very simple manner, understand what the product does, what the core benefits are, and who the product caters to, and then get answers to questions about the product. So yeah, I agree. Like, companies spend a lot of time figuring out the right tools, and that is a problem that needs to be solved.
Mm-hmm. And myself, I have this engineering background. Often I look at these tools and think, okay, why they are so expensive? I could implement something like this. And then, of course, like, I know that once you implement, there will be bugs, and then it's difficult to maintain later. It's probably, I don't know if you had this in your experience. You go to a company, you say, okay, this is a great tool, and then engineers say, no, like, I'm going to implement it myself. So do you?
I have experienced that a lot.
Yeah. So what do you do
Yeah, I would like to say that like one of the things that's really important to sort of think about is that very few people actually like using these tools. For most people, it's a headache. It's an additional sort of task, whether for engineers to implement the tool or for other business teams to go and use these tools. At the end of the day, everyone just wants answers to questions, especially when it comes to data, or they just want data to be available in the right format so that they can use it and derive insights from it or act upon it. So yeah, like implementing new tools is not easy at all, especially when it comes to data tools. There's a lot of like security challenges. There are a lot of compliance issues. So it is difficult. So it's like, and that's why it's really important to understand the problem that the tool solves. And then, if you have the resources, then you can do like a buy versus build analysis. If you build this sort of in-house, then how much it will cost us and whatever resources we need to maintain that versus buying a ready-made solution, or of course open source. Like it's worth mentioning again that a lot of these tools are open source. So Rudderstack is open source. Grouper, a reverse ETL tool, is open source. A bunch of open source BI tools. There's an open source product analytics tool now called PostHog. So in every category, you'll find open source tools. So if you have, again, the resources, of course, it takes a lot of effort to implement an open source tool. Just because open source doesn't mean it's like easy to implement. But if you have the resources, you can obviously, go that route.
Okay. And what kind of roles we need to, so we discussed about tools, we discussed about the flow. So the flow from the moment we start capturing the data to the moment, I think you called it data activation. So to the moment when data is activated.
Yeah.
And I heard that we need at least to have a data, like an engineer, somebody who implements this. So who else do we need to have in a team to implement the whole flow from the beginning to the end?
Yeah, I would say like typically, for early stage startups, you may not have a dedicated data engineer. So, different, like any engineer, a backend engineer could help you with that stuff, or even a front-end engineer could help you with a bunch of that stuff. But eventually you'd need a data engineer to manage all of these different data pipelines. And, it's not just about implementing the tool once, right? You have to maintain it. You have to make sure that everything is working properly. And then of course teams have continuous requests for new events to track. You want to add more data, you want to collect more data. So yeah, at the very least you need a data engineer. And then if you're using a BI tool and if you're implementing a warehouse, then it makes sense to have a data analyst who will be analyzing the data and making the data available in the BI tools. So at the very least, you need those two. I've seen companies hire one data person who does pretty much all of this stuff. And now like there's obviously analytics engineering, which is a more specialized role, which sort of sits in between data engineering and data analysis. And they specifically work on tools like dbt, and they build data models. So again, depending on the resources, you eventually need all of these people. There are companies that are hiring data ops people who basically just make sure that all of these different tools are working. All of these different teams have access to the tools that they need and to the resources that they need. There are companies that are creating product ops teams. So companies that don't have sort of dedicated data teams, they're calling this team called product ops. And product ops often does a lot of the work that data teams do. So they take care of all the tools, they take care of your ETL pipelines, they take care of your warehouse. Again, you have an analyst, an engineer, and someone who understands the product really well. Yeah, it depends on, like, it doesn't matter what you call it, but depending on your resources, you sort of decide how many people you'd want in a team like that. It definitely makes sense to empower product teams and growth teams to understand all of this stuff, so then they can sort of support these teams, or like they can support these teams by taking up a lot of the work and not like adding more work for data people. So one of the typical challenges is that data people are overwhelmed with requests, from different teams, where different teams have requests to track new data or, like make data available in different tools or create dashboards. If you enable different teams to do a lot of that work themselves, then obviously you can make your data people more efficient. And that's the whole sort of conversation around data democratization, where you're not just making data accessible for people, but you're enabling them to sort of work with data, and like you're implementing self-serve analytics tools so that people can go and like derive insights from data themselves. You're investing in upskilling people, maybe having people learn some basic SQL so that they can run very simple queries, so that they don't have to rely on data people to create like for every query that they want to run, or at least they can like take a SQL query and put it in the right place and run it and then understand it. So again, like these things are becoming more and more common, and it just makes sense for like pretty much every sort of team to learn these skills and become data literate. And I strongly believe that one doesn't need to have like an engineering background or even any sort of a technical background to work with data.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, quite a few roles we need to have. But I also like because not every company needs all these people. So for a smaller, for just early stage startup, maybe they just need somebody like an analytics engineer, maybe who can do both analytics and some data engineering, right? And then as the team grow, like maybe we can have they can have a data engineer, then maybe a data ops team who can support all these tools. And then he also talked about data democratization.
Mm-hmm.
And as I understood you, so this is about enabling people in the company, like analysts and others who need access to the data, to actually go and access the data themselves, go and analyze the data themselves, go and implement some things on top of data themselves, right? Is there more to that? Like, what is it?
Yeah, I think data literacy is a big part of it. You cannot just democratize data just by making data available or just by giving people access to different tools. So, investing in data literacy, having people understand from like less technical teams or business teams, how data works, investing in documentation, maybe investing in a data cataloging tool, a data documentation tool, whatever you want to call it. The tools like Atlin, Secoda, a bunch of others that are working on this, sort of solving this problem. So making data available, investing on data literacy within an organization, and then making data available in the right tools where people can actually use that data and not just look at dashboards. And then, of course, like upskilling them so that they can like efficiently use product analytics tools to self-serve their analytics needs, or even like I said, learn some SQL to go and use a BI tool. So yeah, I think it's about to sum it up, I would say it's investing in data literacy and making data available, making clean, accurate data available in the different tools across an organization. Yeah.
And also documented, right? Available and documented. I think that's
I mean, if you don't document it, especially in a remote world, like it's crazy. Like it's one of the most important things companies need to think about. And it's one thing that very few people like to do.
Yeah, about that, how to actually motivate people to write data documentation, because I know it's difficult. Like as a data scientist, I am the one who constantly produce new data for others to consume. But this step of documenting this data is somewhat annoying. So how do you convince people like me and others to actually go and document this data?
Yeah, I think it works when you start small and you start early. Like the earlier that you start, the easier it is going to be. If you keep sort of delaying it, it becomes difficult. And then again, like I strongly believe that if there's a tool that can solve your problem, you should explore that tool and adopt that tool. So tools like Atlin, which are sort of these new age data documentation, data discovery tools, they basically integrate with all your different data sources, with your warehouse, with your BI tools, with different tools, and they actually automate a lot of this documentation process and data exploration. So if you have a lot of different data sources and you have a lot of you have a lot of data in different places, and you don't have like a way to efficiently document it, then it's worth exploring these tools. But obviously, like before you invest in a data documentation cataloging tool, you need to have the right data infrastructure in place. It obviously comes after, once you have data collection, warehousing, analysis, activation, all of that, in place. That's when you invest in these tools. So I think if you're starting today, then it should be like table stakes, that everything that is being tracked should be documented. And everywhere the data is being used should be documented. And like that's how you'd go about it. If you don't start early, then it's just going to be a mess later on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's more about the culture and mindset, right? So you just you just say, okay, we need it. We start early, and for all the data we produce, we must have documentation, because if we don't, then it becomes a mess, right?
Yeah, it's really important to start early, I think. And like you mentioned, it's definitely a culture thing, so yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
Okay. One thing I actually wanted to ask you at the very beginning, but we didn't cover this. So there is a thing also called product-led, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, what is product-led, and what is the difference between being a product-led and being a data-led, if there is any?
Yeah, great question. I think being product-led requires you to be data-led, because the whole idea of being product-led is enabling your product to drive growth, or using your product to drive growth, rather than investing in sales. Although, of course, there's product-led and sales can definitely coexist, but one of the principles of product-led is that users or prospects or customers should be able to try your product before they buy the product, right? So you want to have like a free trial or a free plan, and then people should be able to use the product and derive value from it before they're asked to buy it, before a salesperson. And this takes us back to the earlier conversation where I mentioned that once the salesperson sees that a prospect has actually use the product and derive some value, or reach the aha moment of the product. Often we refer to it as the activation event, where again, in a project management tool, it could be creating a project and adding one user and creating 3 tasks, and that's when you feel like the user has derived some value from the product. So that is being product led, like and typically product led applies to organizations, not individuals. So typically you're a product led company where you invest in these sort of product led efforts and a product led motion and a self-serve onboarding experience. And to create that self-serve onboarding experience, you need data. If you don't have data, then you're not able to sort of enable prospects to have that personalized experience when they're starting to use your product. A common example is, in-app walkthroughs or onboarding walkthroughs that you typically see when you start using a new product. You can actually personalize it a lot based on the role of the user or the industry of the user, and then keep personalizing it based on the features they're using in the product. But only if you are data led, if you have the data and you're using data to build those onboarding experiences, or triggering emails. Emails is a great example. A lot of companies, you might have received an email from a company saying that, hey, you should try using this feature after you've already used that feature. That's very common, right? And that's like, it's a very bad experience, because you've actually opened that email, and someone who's created that campaign, they'll be very happy because they see a good open rate. But actually it's annoyed you, because you're like, their emails are useless. Next time I'm not going to open their email, because they're telling me to do things I've already done, right? But if you had data, if you're data led, you not do that. You'd make sure that if someone has used a feature, they will not be asked use that feature again.
So if I can attempt to summarize what you said. So being a product-led, it first of all applies to a company, not to an individual. It's about taking feedback from users and then being led by this feedback, being led by what users want. And to be able to do this, you cannot call every user and ask, hey, like, what should we do, right? So you need to actually track the data. You need to have this data to make if I may say, data-driven decision, right? Like a decision, like baked by data, like when you
data-informed.
Yes,
data-informed
yes.
decisions. And feedback is definitely an important part of it. Like, gathering feedback while people are using the product, running micro surveys in the product, or even gathering like qualitative data by looking at heat maps and session recordings, like all of that stuff sort of drives towards a product-led approach.
Okay, thank you. So we should be wrapping up, and I wanted to ask you if you want to say any last comments, like anything you want to mention.
Well, I would say just reach out to me in the DataTalks Slack community if you have any questions. I'd love to answer your questions, and you can check out dataled.academy, and you can sign up to my newsletter. So it's not a weekly newsletter. I send out almost every 2 weeks, where I share all of these different lessons. And you can actually check out the past issues on the website, where a lot of the stuff that I talked about is already sort of written. So that'll be helpful for you. So yeah, and thanks again for joining and listening to us.
Yes, and you. I will add to what you just said that you should also go and check the podcast. Right. So how many episodes? How many episodes do you have already?
We have 7 episodes published already.
7 episodes. Published.
And if someone is interested in like talking to me about, especially if you're from a data company, I'd love to chat with you. And if you want to be on the podcast, feel free to reach out to me. 7 episodes are live,
So live, it means that you recorded some which are not published yet, right?
Yes.
Can you tell how many there are already?
Well, we have three more already in the queue, which are ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. Stay tuned, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks again for having me, Alexei. It was great chatting.
Yeah, it was great. Indeed, a lot of information. I took so many notes, and like with these tools, I'll reach out to you later after today to get the links from you, and then I'll put them in the description. And thanks everyone for joining us today, for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. We didn't get any questions, but there was a lot of questions from me, so
that's okay.
I kept you entertained.
No, it was great. I always like chatting about this stuff. So thanks again, and hopefully we'll keep the conversation going on Slack.
Definitely. Okay. Thanks again, and